Good. We are now at the African Baptist Church here on Daufuskie. This is, to me, one of the nicest sites and spots, and is deep in history. And I'm going to just go over a little bit of that with you. First, you can see the beauty of it. This was built by freed slaves after the Civil War, i.e. African Baptist Church. And today, if you come to church here, and anybody is welcome, you'll find that there are only 2 or 3 probably African Americans left here on the island, as sad as that sounds. And the majority of the people in the church now are white. And they basically keep it going, but it's changed quite a bit because of that. To understand this kind of church, you've got to go all the way back to slavery, and it's got a lot to do with the black history. When slaves were brought into this country, they were brought into New York, they were brought into Charleston, they were brought into New Orleans, they were brought into Savannah. There was one thing that was a prerequisite for most plantation owners. You know, although they were bringing these people into slavery, they were very much Christian, and many of them were Anglican, Methodist. And one of the things that they felt like they had a duty to do was to expose these people out of the dark continent of Africa to Jesus Christ. And so the first thing they did is they brought them into larger churches, say maybe in Charleston. If you go to the big churches in Charleston, the old churches going back to the 1700s, you'll see areas where they had for slaves to sit. They had areas, balconies for slaves to sit in. Some areas maybe for the family. But when they brought them into those churches and they started the church service, there was one problem, and that was this. When you opened up the hymn book and you got to that English hymn, a lot of these African Americans would start clapping their hands and stomping their feet and making sounds that nobody had ever heard before. And they were in their mind in a real dilemma. And that was, well, you know, they were getting Christianity, they loved Christ, but they, in the minds of these plantation owners who were primarily of English descent, they weren't doing their hymns justice. So Joe showed you the praise house. They came up with this really interesting idea. On every plantation, they built a praise house. It's just a little building that had benches in it, and that was where the black population could go and praise God the way they wanted to praise God. So, i.e., called a praise house. So when they would go into the praise house, that's when they started their music. And by the way, the music that was started in the praise house is now the only music that America can call its own, as far as I know. It started with the spiritual, it went to the blues, it went to jazz, it went to rock and roll, it went to everything you listen to on the television. It came from the praise house. Every major plantation had one. When the Civil War ended and the whole South was in disarray, what people turned to in disarray is religion. And where did the blacks come? They came to the praise house. Didn't matter who owned it or where it was, they came to the praise house. And that praise house became their church. i.e., this praise house for Merrifield Plantation was on this property, so that's why they built that church here, and that's why the church is here today, which is a very interesting thing, and it's a wonderful addition to history, period. So if you're driving through the South someday, you look across a cotton field and you see an old white church or an old clapboard church, and it's African Baptist or an African Methodist or an African church, it is probably on the site of a praise house at a plantation. And this church may or may not be open when you're here in the golf cart. It's absolutely beautiful inside. If you go inside, there's a place you can leave a little donation if you'd like, and it's a great place to come. And also they welcome all worshipers, and anybody who wants to come can come any Sunday morning. Thank you.